Hi everybody, I want to welcome you to my webinar where today we're going to talk about what's new with SQL Server 2016 and reporting services. So my agenda today is to give you a little bit of an introduction about me, talk about the new features in 2016. I want to talk about how this struck me as the ability to have a portal that's going to support most of, if not all of your reporting needs. I'm going to talk about some of the new features like the new report builder, the new mobile reports. We're going to do a demo and I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of how I built the demo, and then I'll go over some other things at the very end. Feel free to ask me questions in the chat room if you have any, if you want me to talk about anything. I'll warn you also that I am in the middle of a pretty good cold, so if I pause occasionally, it's because I'm coughing in the background, so hopefully that won't be too much of a problem. So just a little bit about me. I've been with Pragmatic Works for 3 years, and before that I was 12 years at Microsoft, including 5 years at Microsoft Consulting Services. And basically I've been doing SQL Server since it became SQL Server in '94. Prior to that I was actually working on Sybase, which if you know the history of SQL Server, that's where it started. And when I'm not working, I'm either playing with grandkids or playing with my camera. That is a picture of me horsing around in Iceland. All right.
Hey, Kathy.
Yeah.
We're seeing the presenter mode, so we're seeing like all the background and stuff.
Oh, well, hang on. Let's go back and let me see if I can get it.
We can see this. I don't know if they saw the slides, but if we could just switch.
Yeah, but I know what I did wrong. Here we go. Show my monitor too. How's that? Is that better?
Yes. Perfect.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about SSRS for a minute. When the subject of me doing a webinar came up, I was struggling to figure out what do I want to do for a topic. And just to let you know, I'm not an SSRS developer. I've never used it before, never done any. For all the years I've been doing consulting, I've barely touched SSRS. But what I found out is that what they're doing in 2016 is pretty cool. And I actually had a customer suggest this to me. One of my customers said, hey, have you seen what they're doing with SSRS 2016? And inside I went, oh, I don't care about that. It's just writing, reports. But you know what? It's way more than that. And as I looked into it, I went, this is actually pretty cool. And since I signed up to do the webinar at the beginning of March, they've actually come out with 2 more releases of it. And it's very, very cool at this point. And that was why I decided to go ahead and do the webinar on it. One of the things that was highlighted to me is that this is basically a complete rewrite of SSRS. Something that same customer said to me was, I thought Microsoft was going to dump SSRS, but here they've gone and completely rewritten it. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But to me, what that shows is a pretty good commitment from Microsoft that this is a product they believe in. They last year purchased DataZen, and they've integrated a lot of those functionality and features into SSRS. So right now, it's way more than just reports. What grabbed my eye on this is that this is really a web portal that you can use for all kinds of different users. And in my career working as a consultant, one of the things that I know is we have a wide variety of users. Some of them just want to look at a report, or a dashboard or a chart or a graph. Some users want to make reports or dashboards or charts or graphs. And then you have some users who say, just give me the data and I'll make whatever I want out of it. What I noticed about SSRS in 2016 is it really covers that wide range of users. You have the ability now for an IT group to support those users that traditionally it's been difficult to support that wide range. What I've seen in consulting is that a lot of IT departments struggle with how to manage what users want in data versus what they want users to see in data. And what I liked about this particular, what they've done with 2016, is I think you have the ability more than ever now to manage that in one place. Previous versions, some of the BI was integrated with SharePoint, some of it was on the desktop, some of it was in reporting services. There really wasn't a lot of support for anything mobile. And that's what 2016 has brought together in one place that I was really excited about. So let's start talking a little bit about what's new in 2016. The most important thing, it's a brand new portal. They've rewritten the entire portal, and they've rewritten it to support newer browsers and technologies. So in the past, you had to have IE, Internet Explorer, and you had to have ActiveX. Well, people, that's not the newest way of doing things. So what Microsoft's done is rewritten this to get rid of ActiveX. It's now all written to support HTML5, which is the current standard for browsers. That means it supports more browsers than just Internet Explorer. And we'll talk more about that in a second. They've also updated the report builder. So in the past, if you used, there's two ways really to build reports. You can build them as projects in Visual Studio, or you can use the report builder that Microsoft gave you, which is kind of an advanced user tool. Well, what they've done is they've made report builder support a lot more than just your traditional paginated reports. So you can see this little graphic that I have. By the way, most of the graphics that I have, a couple of them are from me, but most of them I have to give credit to the reporting services blog at Microsoft. They've done some really good sharing of information on their blog, and I borrowed quite a few of their graphics because they're really good. This is an example of a more modern report where a traditional SSRS report would have a lot of rows and columns. Here you can see 4 different, 3 KPIs and a graph, or maybe it's 2 KPIs and 2 graphs. Excuse me. But you can see it's not your traditional rows and columns, and that's a nice advancement. They've incorporated a lot of the data Zen features and built some features. So now we can include more modern ways of reporting data on our traditional SSRS reports. They've also really focused on mobile reports, and mobile is more than just cell phones. It's tablets. It's pretty much the idea that any device that you might carry or have with you, whether everything from a desktop to a cell phone, needs to be supported so that you can get your reports. There's also a new mobile report publisher. So you have your report builder, and then you have your mobile report publisher. And that mobile report publisher does some pretty cool things I'll show you in a second. One of the other new features is custom branding. So this was a feature that DataZen had that Microsoft picked up on when they bought them and incorporated it into SSRS. I'll actually show you how we can build a branding scheme for a customized look and feel for SSRS. It also supports the Power BI apps for Android, iPhone, and Windows, in Windows even. For both tablets and phones. So whether you have an iPad or the new Samsung, I forget what it's called, you should be able to get the Power BI app. And just to test that, I actually loaded it on my phone this weekend. I have both a Windows and a Android phone, and it seems to work pretty well. Something else that I'm going to touch on, but I'm not going to dive at all deep into, is some new features in data security. Part of having a web portal means also making your data secure. And there were a couple of things that happened to grab my eye as I was doing research for this webinar. One of them is row-level security. So they have more of a true row-level security than they've had in the past. The second one is dynamic data masking. This is something that really grabbed me. This is not a typical security feature as much as it is a presentation feature. So imagine you've got an HR report and you want to be able to identify people, but you only want the last 4 digits of their social security number. You used to have to write some kind of custom code that, depending on whether the user was an HR person or a non-HR person, it would present the data differently. What we can do now is actually apply that presentation logic right in the database. So your database designers, as they build security, can decide who can see the data and who can't see the data. But maybe they want to know that there is data. So for example, on an email name, you might see the first letter and the last letter and the rest of it's masked. There's all kinds of masking, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it definitely grabbed my eye in conjunction with what we can do in reporting services that I thought was pretty cool. There's also some new features with data encryption. There's always encrypted and transparent data encryption. Both of those features are pretty cool, And while I'm not going to dive deep into them, I wanted to at least point them out. For those of you who care about that kind of thing, you should definitely take a look at it. So this is my tiny bit of humor here. As I was writing this, I started to type one portal to support them all, and I thought that sounded like Lord of the Rings. Basically, what I really liked about what SSRS is doing is it's a single web portal that's going to support all different types of users. The graphic that I have on the screen is my view of when I go into a company. I see this very often. I see companies with a very small number of power users, and these are people who they know data. They know how to get internal data. They know what to do with it. Many of them have traditionally been ones to either use the SSRS report builder or even write SQL code in order to get the data that they want. They're familiar with corporate data. They're also familiar with desktop data. So as we all know, the proliferation of Excel means everybody has data on their desktop. And they might also know how to go get external data. These are those users that are really strong users. They're probably Power BI or some other reporting tool. Excuse me. And they're just really, really strong data people. They understand corporate data. I tend to find that as the smallest group of users when I look at a community of users within inside a company. The next level down is this idea of report builders. I've taught Power Pivot and Power BI for a couple years now, and one of the things that I notice is that within the classes that I teach, there's a few people who fall into that power user category, but there's almost all of them fall into the report builder category. They don't necessarily want to build a data model, but they want to take a data model and build reports. They want to add business knowledge. They want to make their own columns or calculations. The bottom of my pyramid is the largest group, and these are just the report readers. These are the people who every morning want to come in. They want to log in, look at their dashboard, look at their report. They basically run their business on data, and so they need to be able to see their reports. What I like about what SSRS has done is I think that it now supports all three of these, the entire pyramid of users. So I talked for a minute. This is an example I've put up on the screen of how customizable it is. It's incredibly customizable, from colors to headings to putting your own logo up there. I'll actually show you this theme on my portal so that you can see how it works. What they've done in SSRS right now is they've allowed users to have access to all of these different things that I have listed on the bullets. Data connections are ways for users to access different databases. So you can actually put the connection strings up in these data connections and allow users to use Power BI or Excel or something else in order to access various different data sources. This means users don't have to know the details of your SQL setup or your cubes or your whatever it is on the back end, because we can do data connections to quite a wide variety of data servers. Those data connections can be used to build data sets. To me, this is one of the nicest things. It's a predefined query. So if you know that people care about your sales detail, but everybody wants a little different slice of it, you can actually create that big data set and let the users pick out the pieces that they want. Somebody with IT and SQL Server knowledge can write a query, and then everybody can use that query. Another new feature is the idea of KPIs right on your web portal. So a KPI is a key performance indicator. It's our stoplight, red, green, yellow. How are we doing? Are we good? Are we green? Are we okay? We're yellow. Are we not doing so well? Are we red? We now can see a list of those KPIs right on the web portal, so that when people come in, it starts to look a little more like a dashboard. And in fact, to enhance that, we also can add dashboards to the web portal. So you're going to see in a minute, I'm going to show you a screen that has all of these things on it, and it makes it a pretty powerful presence when you have all this available to the users. There's a lot of security that's available in these things. including what I talked about a minute ago. So we've always had role levels, R-O-L-E, level security. We now have row level security in 2016. And this masking technology that I talked about a minute ago, I think those are going to work together to give you some nice ability to generate a row that works across a wide range of users. I'm sorry, a report that works across a wide range of users. Probably the coolest thing is we're now compatible with IE10, with Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and even Edge. So I am an ex-Microsoft person. I'm used to living on the edge, pardon the pun, by always having the newest and greatest. And I can tell you that when I went to Windows 10, not everybody was ready for Edge. And so it's really nice to actually see something that works with Edge very well. There is no more ActiveX. All of that is gone. And all of the content is now HTML5, which, as I said, right now is the current standard in web coding. And you can see the custom branding that they put up there. Those are all new features. Very cool features. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some of these individual things. There's a new look and feel for traditional reports. I kind of like that there are, the traditional reporting used to be rows and columns. What they've done is they've rewritten the report builder so that you can still do rows and columns, but and of course I put a graphic up of a row and column report just to show you that. But you can also add a lot of graphs and dials and charts, and you'll see a little bit of this in my demo as to what you can have. Really what we've done is now taken reporting services and given it the, to quote Microsoft, the first class experience in all the new browsers. So reporting services, now you can get those reports even if you're on you know, an Apple machine with Safari browser. You can still get the reports that you need. So here's an example of those new modern reports. So the last report I had was rows and columns. Here you've got, and let me see if I can point it out here, you've got a KPI, whoops, just a minute. There we go. We've got a KPI over here. Got a KPI over here. We've got a little bit of a graph right there, and we've got another graph over here. So this is a report that's actually presenting quite a bit of complicated information, but it's in a nice graphical format now instead of a lot of rows and columns. It's very cool. Let's see. There we go. All right. Let's talk about KPIs for a minute. So here's an example of a couple of KPIs that I built. And basically we can pin these KPIs to the dashboard. You don't have to show every KPI that you build, and I'll show you how you can do that. But it allows you to have these KPIs and be able to view how you're doing with, for whatever, like here I have monthly and yearly sales. And we're able to see that we're at 97% of total on the monthly sales. Yearly sales, we're at 29 million. These will show up on the dashboard, the main dashboard for reporting services. They're very dynamic, so they show up, they can read at the time you connect. You also now have the ability to cache that data so that even if you're offline, you can still see your KPIs. They don't come up as big X's. And I put the screen up just to give you an idea of what you can do to build it. There's an awful lot of very cool features that we can use in building the KPI. So just a minute, I gotta find my cursor. Oops, there we go. So for example, this is a demo right here that I'm kind of got the laser pointer next to. That's a demo of what it would look like. We can name it, we can put a description. We can decide what the values are. I'll show you all of these in the demo. What's really cool is we can do the KPI, or we can do a KPI plus a trend. That's a pretty nice feature that I had a lot of fun playing with this weekend. Okay. So, oh, there we go. All right. So let's talk about mobile reports for a minute. Traditional reports with SSRS were always printed, or they're paginated. You had page 1, page 2, etc. What they've done in mobile reports is given you a grid that you can fill in, and you can populate that grid as a default value or as a mobile phone look and feel or a tablet look and feel. And I kind of laughed because it even supports desktops. There are still some of us who use the desktop. So you see two examples here. This example I'm pointing at right now is set up for tablets. This one down here is set up for a phone. You'll notice that the same graphs, and I believe there are 10. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 different graphs in this view. 10 different pieces of information that we're showing the user on one screen. And if they turn their tablet sideways or they view it on their phone where they have an up and down display, I get the same 10, but I've decided how it looks. It's not depending on your operating system to adjust the content. You get to actually set the content up for the device that you're displaying on. And for those who care, this is all part of that DataZen purchase that they made in 2015 when they bought DataZen. But it's very cool. When you design your reports, you now can think about all kinds of users who might be looking at the data. Yeah. And just real quick, I wanted to touch on security again. I think that while this isn't necessarily a direct part of SSRS, I did a little bit of reading on it because I think it has a huge impact on reporting. The things that they're doing to keep the data secure gives you more freedom in how you can report, because now you're not depending on a developer to get it right. You're able to set this up at the database level so that developers can't bypass the security. So the dynamic data masking was the one feature I wanted to point out because I think it's pretty cool, especially when it comes to reporting. There's a lot of data that you want to be able to show users, but maybe like credit cards is the perfect example. But maybe you want, it's a support person and all you want them to see is the last 4 digits of the credit card. As I said earlier, what you can do is you can go in and have a developer write some fancy code that, or write some basic code that will allow you to mask that data on the way out to the presentation layer. But you again are assuming that they get it right and that nobody can hack into that. What this is going to let us do is allow us to build a report and build the viewability of that data right into the structure of our database. So where a sysadmin can still see anything, and there are ways around this, if everybody's going through reporting services, then you've got a way to mask that data consistently across different levels of user access. So if I build one report that's customer data that's for my support team, I might want to give the end person who answers the phone just viewability of the last 4 digits of the social security number, but maybe a manager who might be handling an escalated call might get visibility to a higher level. I can define 2 different roles, and then the same report will show the data differently depending on who's running the report. And again, I'll say it's not a true security protection. I read quite a few blogs over it that were talking about different ways you could get things unmasked. And one of them was just doing a select into a new table that unmasked the field. So don't think of it as a security measure, but it certainly makes it, it makes it more consistent when you're doing this kind of reporting. So I thought it was a pretty interesting technology, and I'm definitely going to be looking more into it. The other features that like I said, I thought were pretty important were the row-level security and transparent data encryption and always encrypted. As I read up on these features, it seems like you have the ability now to have a pretty solid security model for the reporting that you're trying to do, and it makes it much simpler to be consistent with the data as you're reporting on it. I think the combination of these things provides a really good layer of protection without counting on developers or the presentation layer. All right, any questions before I go to the next step? Because the next step is demos.
You have access to the questions panel, so I know there's...
Yeah, I have it. Maybe I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I have access to it, and I didn't see it. I was looking at the chat window instead of the questions window, so I apologize.
No problem.
Let me figure out how to make that bigger, because right now I can't read it. So just one second.
You can also pull it out of the panel too if you need to.
Let me try that. Can you ask me the first question, because I am not able to get this to pull out.
There's lots of them. So
oh, dang it.
Let me go through.
Should have interrupted me. Go ahead. Give me the first one.
Is there a replacement for report models?
I think, so I apologize for not knowing the direct answer to that question. As I said, I'm not a SSRS expert, but you still have the need. I think the whole way that you're building reports is quite different. I will get you the answer to that question because I didn't actually look into that. What's the next question?
Can you explain the difference between what's available in Enterprise and what's available in Azure?
Not off the top of my head, although I will tell you they're much closer than they've ever been. So I was actually doing the Enterprise version on an Azure machine and not the Azure version, but the reading that I did over the weekend before it said that they're much, much closer than they've been in the past. In the past, you've had a lot of differences. So be aware, the latest version just came out 9 days ago. So an awful lot of the information is changing, and it'll probably change again before they release it. But what I've seen up to this point is that they are incredibly close. Go ahead and ask me another one.
Okay. Someone wants to know if this will replace SharePoint and Power View.
Eventually, yes. I think you'll see a lot of this come over here. Power BI hooks up to this, and I think the goal is to move that whole technology over to SSRS. Now, I'm not a Microsoft person, and don't anybody panic. I don't think it's going away tomorrow or with 2016, but I think that's the direction that they're headed from everything that I see, is that they're going towards SSRS being able to be hosted as a portal. You can connect a lot of that up in this, and I'm not going to show that part today because in all honesty, they're still coming out with all of this. But yeah, I think that's where they're going with this. That's what got me excited about it. What's next?
Someone wants to know if SSRS 2016 only works in IE 10 and up.
Yes, it's really, you can still get a lot of the reports and view them, but because it needs HTML5, it's intended to be used in IE 10 and up, because the IE 9 browsers don't support all the features.
Okay. There's still tons of questions, but do you want to go ahead and move on to the demo?
Let's go to the demo because I honestly can't, I'm having trouble with the questions. Do me a favor, if you see any questions come up, kind of give me a heads up because I cannot get that questions window to work in my browser.
Okay.
And or in my thing. I don't know why.
We have a lot, so I bet we're probably going to have to save them until afterwards and probably do a follow-up blog with all the answers to the questions.
That's most likely the case, and in fact, let's go ahead and assume that because I got a very nice demo to do, and that's probably going to chew up the next 20 minutes or so. So let's show a little bit of this functionality. Just so that everybody knows, they just last week came out with the latest release of reporting services. I think they've made at least 2, if not 3 releases in the last month. There was the Community Technology Preview 3.3, and then they came out with the Release Candidate 0, and then last week they came out with what Microsoft called a full-featured, features release ready of reporting services in the RC1 release. So excuse me, I've kind of been working on a moving target trying to get this demo built. It's been funny, every time I get the demo done, they change a feature and I got to redo things. But I will say they're definitely, the new features make it awesome. When I first started building the demo, as an example, KPIs could only come from SQL Server. And now you can pull them in from SSRS, which makes it, not RS, sorry, from analysis services, which made it much easier to do my demo. So let's talk about what I have and what I'm doing. So I'll tell you one thing that hasn't changed. This is my SSRS dashboard, my web portal that I talked about in the demo. Give me 1 second while I switch to one thing here. There we go. So this is a very, very small set of what we can do. So over the weekend when I rebuilt this, because I got the latest version of everything, I added a couple of KPIs. These are the monthly sales and yearly sales. I added a couple of mobile reports, and you can see each of these mobile reports show up as a thumbnail on my screen. And as soon as I get there it is, my cursor back, I can click on this report and I can make it really big. So here's an example that might, and this is sample data right now, but it wouldn't be that hard to pull this and make it point to some real data. I'll show you how to do that. So here's an example of two different charts that we've added, a thermometer chart and a heat map. So the heat map lets us know how we're doing state by state and gives us some feedback on weather things. So it looks like Washington is beating Oregon. I like that. I'm in Seattle, by the way. That's why I was making that joke. But that's an example of one of my dashboards. Here's another example of a sales dashboard. So I've got a gauge chart, which people love gauge charts. I've got a bar chart, and I've got this kind of like a thermometer chart, a progress bar that tells me how I'm doing. And in this case, I'm at 96.8% of total, so it looks like we're pretty much full. These are all examples of dashboards that you can build. Here is another dashboard that's actually our old rows and columns report. This is going to take a second because it's actually loading quite a bit of data, but it gives me the ability, if I was a support person, to be able to go in and actually look at all the detailed data that goes with any of these. And this dashboard could be the drill through from one of my other dashboards. And if I'd been really feeling better, I would have set that up, but I'll just show you the detail report. It will come up because I've had it come up before, but I just rebuilt the machine or restarted the machine, and so it's caching the data the first time. It'll run faster the next time. There we go. So there's our sales detail report. All right, pretty straightforward report. I could add filters, I can add all kinds of things to it. I was building just to kind of show samples. So you'll notice we have our KPIs, we have our mobile reports, we still have paginated reports. So here's an example of a sales product by category. And this is a paginated report, but I built it as a pie chart just to show, and if anybody who's familiar with AdventureWorks knows that most of the sales are in bikes. But it's an example of a traditional report that would have been built in either Visual Studio or through the report builder. Here is more of your traditional rows and columns report. And I can do what I've been able to do in the past, which is click on something and have it expand out. Okay. There we go. So that's just a very quick example of the kind of reports and different types of things you can do. Well, I want to dive a little bit deeper into how I got to these. So you'll notice down here I have data sources, and I've built two data sources. One of my data sources, and I can rebuild these, but I think it goes faster if I just show you what I built. This data source is connecting to AdventureWorks DW. If you don't know what AdventureWorks is a sample database that Microsoft and the community put out on Codeplex. And if you just search for AdventureWorks, you'll find it. But it's a nice database that we can use for demos, and it generally has data that will support most of the new features that people are trying to do. So in this case, I just put out a description that says it's version 2016. The latest version they had of AdventureWorks was to support the Community Technology Preview 3. So I installed that, and then I upgraded the database to Release Candidate 1, which is the most current version of SQL 2016. I do have the ability to hide this in the tile view if I want. I'm not going to do that right now. Well, I'll do that right now, and then I'll show you what we do about it. The nice thing that this does, though, is it lets me pick the credentials. So I can, if I have a really good setup and I want always to have my reports run as the user using Windows authentication, I can set that up. I can also pre-code some credentials. Let's say I have data from an application and I always need the same user login for everybody, which by the way I do not recommend, but I know those applications still exist. I can actually code in those credentials. I can log in without any credentials, meaning anybody can see it, or I can also prompt the user for credentials. In this case, I'm just going to use my credentials because I'm not trying to demo security. So if I hit apply, because I did change the viewability of this, and I go back to the home menu, you'll notice that this is shaded out. Now the reason it's not completely hidden is I actually have an option here to decide whether I want to see hidden things, which kind of to me sounded like a conflict. But I have a level of security that will let me see, because I'm an administrator, these hidden items. If I uncheck this, you'll notice that goes away. The view menu up here allows me to, for example, hide data sources, resources, and data sets from my average users. And if you do that, it just makes the screen, a lot of users, remember my pyramid of users? The bottom level of users probably don't care anything about any of those features. That top level user, the power user, absolutely cares about these things. So they can configure the portal the way they want to see the portal. All right, so a data source is, I'm going to go back and make that visible again because I want to make sure it's, there we go. Let's do this. There we go. And this test connection button, by the way, I found incredibly handy. Let me show you one more quick thing for anybody who wants to go play with this. I found this to be incredibly helpful. I never remember connection strings and how they go together. This link will take you to Microsoft's page that will give you sample connection strings. Ta-da! So if you decide to go play with this, that's an incredibly helpful. That helped me a lot. All right, so that's how we build a data source. Now a data source connects us to data. All that's doing is connecting me to the data. I think I have to refresh to get that to show. There we go. All that's doing is connecting me to my data source. It could be SQL Server, it could be Oracle, it could be Access, it could be an Excel file. It could be a tabular model or a Power Pivot model or a MDX model. There's a lot of choices that we've got to connect with, so it's pretty powerful. This weekend when I was working on it, I was able to add a tabular model instance to my machine and build a tabular cube in about 20 minutes off of AdventureWorks, and that gave me a connection to the Internet Sales Cube that I created, and I'm able to get my KPIs out of this instead of having to write SQL code to figure out a KPI. So that's brand new, by the way. That did not exist. If you played with earlier versions, that did not exist, and so that's a very nice new feature. All right, so once I have data sources built, now I can build this idea of a data set. So a data set is a query into a database, and I'll give you a couple of examples. This particular query is going to go get my sales detail, and I'm going to have product data in it. So I'm going to click Manage here just to show you. This is going to actually allow me to look at this. There's a button here to edit this in Report Builder. I could have also gone up and built a brand new one, but I just want to show you how this works with one I've already built, basically so that you don't have to watch me type bad SQL. Just kidding. All right, so you'll notice that I'm actually editing this right from the web portal. So my Report Builder utility is available directly from the web portal. It used to be that you had to launch this a different way. Now you can get to it right from inside your web portal. So for this particular query, I wrote a SQL query that went in, and I'll run it so you can see what it looks like. That pulls out the order date and the year and the month, the sales amount, the name, the product subcategory, and the product category. Because I know I'm going to roll this data up by either date or by category, and I want my drill down. So I made this as an example of a data feed that somebody might want to use, a data set that somebody might want to use in reports. You can make these data sets pretty complex. And again, if you have people who just want to do the presentation layer, you can have IT report writers create these queries because not every user is going to be able to do that. There is the ability to do this in more of a user format. So let me show you how we would, let me get out of this, and how we could do this. If I click this new button and I say new data set, we're going to get our report builder again. It's going to let me pick a data set to work with. In this case, I'm going to pick the AdventureWorks DW. And now I've got that user-based query tool that's going to let me go figure out what exactly I want to put on my report. So let's say I know I want sales amount. And in this time, I want it by sales territory. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to grab my sales territory country. I think that's all I want is country. Excuse me. And my sales amount. And in this case, I want to aggregate that data. And I want to sum it. And you'll notice that it automatically said, well, this is text. You must want to group by that. So now my query would sum these two things. I also have the ability to move this around in my query. Let's say I want it to be country and then sales amount. One of the nice things that this particular tool lets you do is handle auto detection of relationships. So if I expand this window out a little bit, you can see that it's used the metadata in my SQL Server database. Basically, it's used the primary key and foreign key relationships to figure out that I have a join on sales territory key between these two tables. I'll give you a little tip real quick because I'll tell you this confused me for a few minutes. Let's say I also want to be able to sort by date. So I didn't want the whole date table. Hang on, let's do this. So let's say I also want the date, which I happen to know is that field. No, let's say we want year. That's better. We're going to sort it by year, not fiscal year. Where's calendar? There we go, calendar year. Now, when I auto-detect my relationships, you'll notice that my relationships to dim date, there's actually, and this took me a while because I actually didn't see it right off the bat, there's actually 3 relationships, and if I could get my cursor to work right, there we go. You can see there's multiple relationships between this. If I were to run this right now, it wouldn't find anything that matched. In fact, let's just run it and I'll show you. Run query. And the reason is because it's trying to use all 3 of those relationships at the same time. I don't really want it to use all 3 at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this. Oops, actually I'm going to double click over here, sorry. Oh, wait, sorry. I have to edit fields. So when I edit these relationship fields, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take out 2 of the relationships. I know I only want the relationship to order date key to be the one that I use in this join. For anybody who wants a follow-up on that, send me a question and say, please follow up on that, and I'm happy to write a blog post or do something like that to help follow up. But basically what I'm doing is there used to be 3 relationships that were auto-detected, and I only want to use one of those joins when I build my query. Now when I run my query, I get back data because I've only joined on one of the date fields. I could also put a filter in if I wanted to and say I want only US. I don't actually want to do that, but I could if I wanted to. All right. So this is letting me write a query, and if you want to see the query, you can hit edit as text, and it will show you that query that you just created. Most people don't. Once you get here, I don't believe you can go back. I couldn't find a way to go back. But that's the idea. So there is a user-based query. In theory, one of those power users who maybe doesn't know how to write SQL, but does understand, maybe they've worked with Access or they've worked with other tools and they understand how to pull data together. That does exist. So now I've got all these different data sets that I built. Now these data sets become available for my KPIs and for my mobile reports. So let's look at this KPI real quick. Whoops, didn't mean to hit that button. So here's my KPI that I picked. What's really nice is I have these different visualizations for trends that I can use. So I can change it to a bar graph if I want. Just so you know, by the way, I built my data set and sorted it descending, and that so the little chart, it should really be read right to left because the data on the left is the newest data instead of the oldest data, and that was my goof. I didn't realize it until yesterday. But in this particular case, what I've said is our monthly sales goal is 1.5 million per month. I think that was the original thing that I had in there. One of the later releases during the month, they actually allow you now to decide how you want to set it. So in this case, I'm picking a data set field. So when I build my KPI, I can build it two ways. I can build it manually, which means every single time I have anything to do with the KPI, I have to go out and set the values. Or I can drive it with these data sets. Now you could create lots and lots and lots of data sets to do lots and lots of KPIs. If you spend more time on it than I did, you could actually create one data set that would handle most of your KPIs. I also know that if you use tabular models and you've already built KPIs in there, you can get those values out. That's actually what this data set does. This particular data set, let's go back and look at it real quick. If I look at the 5-year sales trend, which I believe is the data set that I pulled out, let's edit this in Report Builder. This actually comes out of my cube, and in my cube I have a KPI build. It's out of my tabular model. So in my KPI, I've got the sales total, and I've got the value, the goal, and the status. These are the three things that I need in order to build a KPI out in the web portal. Now, I could write really fancy SQL code to bring that out, but it's really easy if you do it in a tabular model. So I decided to take the easy route and do it in the tabular model. The report builder works a lot like the one did for SQL. It allows me to pick the values that I want. So my data set includes the goal and the status for each one of my KPI, for my KPI that I built. So let's go back in here and look at our KPI. There we go. Whoops. And so here I'm saying I want to pick a data set field for my KPI. So my value is actually coming from my sales trend table, and I pick the sales amount, which is the value that was in that query. For my goal, which is what I'm comparing against, I'm again setting a data set field. And in this case, I took the average of the sales amount that came out. That's how I picked my goal. And for my trend line, I picked the sales amount, and it picks the first 5 values that it gets back. That's how it picks the trend. So I picked the latest data. Sorry, my voice is getting a little bad. I picked the latest 5 records in my data set. That's how I built it. And so it's giving me a trend of how this month looks against the last 5 months. This month, it's the beginning of the month in the way this data is built, so it's pretty low. And it's yellow because I set it to yellow. I could have set it to anything I wanted because I set it manually. I have another KPI that I actually set it using the data set, because I wanted to show you both. So here I've used my data set for trending. Here I used my sales amount, but it's picking the trend off of those last 5 values instead of off of the average. Excuse me. All right, so with all KPIs, we're picking a value, a goal, and a status. We can also pick a trend. One of the latest updates they did in the RC1 was allowed both of these sets of data to come from a single data set. Originally, when I built this, I had to do the KPI value in one data set, the KPI goal in a data set, and the goal status and the value could be in a data set, but the trend had to be in a different data set. Now it can all come from the same data set. The other thing that you can do that's very cool that I didn't do yet is I could actually drill through to a mobile report. So let's say this KPI is here, and I want to make it drill through to a report, I can actually go up here and let's make it drill through to this report. So now if I click on my KPI, let's apply this. Let's go back out here. I'm going to hit refresh just to make sure everything got refreshed correctly. And now if I go to this data set and I go in here, I can drill through to this related content. And now I can see this sales dashboard right from my KPI. If I had a lot of KPIs and a lot of dashboards, this can be very handy. All right, so we've talked about data sets. Once you have a data set, I showed you the report builder, which we use to build our data sets, and we can use to build our paginated reports. Let me show you again real quick. Here's our paginated reports. This is our traditional report builder. And in this case, we're going to build, we can build a chart, we can build a map, we can do all these different things. Real quick, we'll just do a matrix one. So we can create a data set or we can browse for data sets. So I think we'll just stay with our monthly sales. Oops, brought it in there twice. And these are the fields that are available on my little report. So I'm going to put my sales amount over here in the values. And I want the year and the month. Now, if I was a real reporting person, I would have definitely made better names, but I was in a hurry. So now I'm going to real quick build this report. Finish. I'm going to add a report. So this is sales by year and month. And when I save this report, I'm going to do a save as. I can save it out on my report server so that it can be available for everybody. And I'm going to save it. And it'll get added into my paginated reports. Okay. All right, so now you're going to see the new paginated report. We're coming up on the top of the hour, so I'm going to do one more report because I think, so here's my paginated report. And if I click that, you'd see the same thing we saw earlier. I do want to show you the mobile report builder because I think that's really the flash on this. So let's build a new mobile report. This has a similar app. You got to download it the first time you use it, but once it's downloaded, you have it. So you can see here we can build as big of a grid. We can build a pretty big grid. In this case, I'm going to build a pretty small grid, so I'm going to build a 2x2. Actually, I'm going to build a 2x3. So I have the ability now to put 6 different things into this mobile report. So I'm going to put that number because I think it's always cool to have a really big number. I love this gauge. That's really cool. I want the thermometer, but I want to show you what I'm going to do with the thermometer. With the thermometer, I'm actually going to make this take up 2 spots in my grid by dragging this little box down and making it bigger. And then the last thing I'm going to put up is this linear gauge, but I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to drag it out because I want it to take up a couple spots. So I now have 4 reports that I can put on my grid. Now, what I've done is designed a default layout. Let's look and see what we want that layout to be if it's a tablet. So now if it's a tablet, what am I going to do? I think I'm going to go back with a tablet. I'm going to make it 2 wide and I think 4 long. Whoops. I'm doing it backwards. Here we go. Let's add in a new row. So these are my 4 things that I want in there. I'm going to again bring my thermometer in, and I'm going to again make it long. And I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to make it wide. And I'm going to bring these 2 back in. And this is what it's going to look like on a tablet. Probably look pretty similar to what it's going to look like on a phone. But the key is, here's my master one. Here's my tablet layout. And maybe on a phone, so I have 4 of them, I'm going to make it 5 rows and 1 column. And now I'm going to put this up there, but I'm going to make it cover 2. And this covers 1. And this covers 1. Because I know that on my phone's only 4 inches wide. So I want everything to line up like this. So me as a designer, now I have the ability to do any of those formats and lay it out any way that I want. I can also, you'll notice right now, it makes it look like there's a lot of data in there. I also, as a designer, have the ability to do my design with sample data. So I have this thing called a simulated table. But I can add real data to it if I want to see the real numbers by clicking on Report Server. So this is my report server. It's going to show me all of those data sets that we built. Let's pick monthly sales. Sorry, I got construction going on in the background. It's okay. Anyway, and I can use this data now in my report. So I can decide to pick my monthly sales, and my sum amount is what I want to show in this value here. I can do the same thing over here. I can say what's going to be in my table. I didn't bring a comparison amount, so I got it, so it'll be hard to put a comparison. With the right data set, I could do it. Here's another one that I can bring in the data and use the data that I have in order to get these things that I want to do. And this way now, when I build my reports and I preview my report, there's my tablet preview. All right. So that's a very fast look at the mobile report writer. You can see the possibility for this. There's some settings that you can set. Let's say your fiscal year starts in June. You can set that so that it knows what the start of the year is. If you're doing time navigation in your reports and you want to set the day a week, you can set an effective date, which allows you to time shift the data. So this year is really 2009. And again, you can look at the preview if you want that. I think we got about 2 minutes left, so I think we probably want to wrap this up. I will definitely take all these questions that I couldn't read in the box and get you guys answers to them over the next day in a blog post, and we'll send that out to everybody who made it to the presentation.
Perfect. Yes, and I know a couple people wanted to know if you're going to make your slides available too.
I believe we can make the slides available. Let me go show you real quick before we wrap up one last thing on the slides. Whoops, let me go over here. Because yes, I assumed you guys would get the slides, so I created a slide for what I used to set up the demo. This is exactly the steps in very short version of what I did to set the demo up. I used an Azure VM and how I installed they had a CTP. It should say CTP, I apologize. CTP3, I added all of those things as all those software pieces. I loaded AdventureWorks, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I did. I included a snapshot of everything that I downloaded. And then I gave you guys a couple of links for the documentation that I used. And honestly, the best documentation I found was the SSRS team blog. That was awesome. Those guys are fabulous. They're also very active on social media, so if you have questions, they're pretty good. I gave you the link to the MSDN documentation as well. And then the other thing is just go Bing or Google SSRS 2016. I found lots of good stuff. Let me warn you as my last statement to you guys, it's still pre-release. Just in the month that I was working on this, several features changed quite a bit. I think by now at Release Candidate 1, they're pretty close to done, but you know, there can still be some issues. I'll give you my old Microsoft consulting advice. If you are an early adopter, you tend to get a lot of love from Microsoft. So the basic engine platform, I think, is very, very stable and very reliable. It's only the newer features that tend to be scary on a new release. But I wouldn't, I would seriously consider looking at SSRS 26 or at SQL Server 2016, even though it's a brand new release. I think there's enough stability in it. I would really consider looking at it. So that was my last couple of slides. This is the stuff that, you know, this is what drove me to do this when I don't have a big background in SSRS. I think there's, from my role as a consultant, I think there's a lot of ability with this to start building that one platform that you support all your users. And that's what I had. So yes, I believe we'll make the slides available, right?
Yes. So Kathy will send me those, and then I will post a link to them on the blog as soon as we get that posted. And I'll make sure Kathy gets all those questions today. Kathy does have a Twitter. Is it Miss Kathy V? Is that right, Kathy?
Well, so my Twitter started when I was at Microsoft, so originally it was MS as in Microsoft, but now it's just Ms. That works perfect. So MS Kathy V.
Okay.
Ms. Kathy V.
Perfect.
That's me.
So you can find her on Twitter, and also follow us on Twitter to make sure you stay up to date on all of our trainings and stuff like that, because we will definitely be posting when this blog goes live. But you can also just keep an eye out, go to blog.pragmaticworks.com, and you can get a link to it on our website as well. As always, I know a couple people asked, this session was recorded and it will be posted, and you will receive an email tomorrow with the link. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can email me, Liz. It's the email that comes with all your go-to webinar information, and I'll be more than happy to pass on any questions you have to Kathy. Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it, especially since you are not feeling well.
Thank you for putting up with my terrible voice and occasional coughing.
It was not bad. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.